Haiti heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. Zhenghe and Fuding are the two historic birthplaces for white tea. The story goes that around 250 years ago, some tea bushes were moved from the Taimu Mountains in Fujian down to the village of Diantou in Fuding, and the white tea processing technique was created. From there, the bushes and the technique spread throughout Fuding and into Zhenghe, and both places have been making white tea ever since. So over 250 years of tea production in Zhenghe and Fuding. And while Fuding white tea is very, very famous, Zhenghe white tea is less well known, even though it shares such a long lineage of history. And so what I wanted to do today is to taste back to back a Fuding Baimudan or Fuding white peony with a Zhenghe Baimudan or a Zhenghe white peony, and try to express and explain my impression of the differences, the key differences between these two traditional heirloom origins for white tea. So let's quickly scope these teas. They're both April 2023 teas. This is from the 4th of April, this is from the 2nd of April. So both early picking Baimudan or white peony. And if you don't know the differences between the white teas, or if you want to see the origin, see where these teas come from and learn everything you need to know about white tea processing from origin, then I'll put a link to our tea trip video down below. Check it out. It really will give you a whole world of knowledge around white tea. So both of them from April. The cultivar on these teas, they're both Dabai cultivar, but this one is called the Fuding Dabai and this one is called the Zhenghe Dabai. Now obviously you can imagine that tea plants transplanted and moved around, they start to develop their own genetics in the areas that they are grown. Because some of these bushes are going to be seed grown, and others, even if they're made from cuttings, the genetics will vary as the plant mutates and changes over the course of many generations. So they're called Dabai, which basically means big white, but actually they're sort of subdivided into Fuding Dabai and Zhenghe Dabai. The origin, as I said, this is from Fuding in Fujian, this is from Zhenghe in Fujian, not too far apart, and yet, as we'll see, they have a very particular different style of white tea production. The picking and processing on this is going to be very similar. So we'll go through the broad picking and processing. It'll be picked, and the picking will be buds, as you can see, and larger leaves. So buds and larger leaves to give that real balance between the flavor. So you've got the buddy, you've got the younger leaves, and you've got the larger leaves. And I will say from the outset that when I pick Baimudan or white peony, I tend to pick this style of white peony. So there is a lot of white peony on the market, which is very, very, very bud heavy. So it looks almost like a silver needle. However, in my opinion, you're not really getting enough distinction between silver needle, and you're not really getting the most out of the flavor that a white peony can bring. There's also white peony king. If you want to know about white peony king, I'll put a link in the description below where you can understand the differences between white peony and white peony king. But overall, and this is a generalization, but overall I tend to pick teas that have a nice balance between the buds, the younger leaves, and the larger leaves. And so there'll be this picking, there'll be an extended withering phase. And that extended withering phase is basically bringing the tea from fresh to dry. And it's the drying process which stops the oxidation for white tea. With other teas, the teas go through a heating process to stop the oxidation. But with white tea, it goes through a drying process. And so because there's no water or very little water left in the leaves, there's a little opportunity for the chemicals to interact with each other anymore. And so the oxidation stops. And this is why white tea is so suitable for aging, because actually just with a bit of humidity, you can move the tea, you can change the tea, but that's the subject for another story, and there are plenty of videos about tea aging. I'll put them in the description below as well. You have lots of videos that you can research if you want to dive deeper into white tea. So the tea is basically withered and dried in one long extended process, and it sounds very simple, but it's extremely skilled, and ideally some of that processing needs to happen under the sun. The reason for that is that the full spectrum light of the sun just amplifies aromatics and changes things. So withered and dried in one long process. Some of that's going to be under the sun, some of that's going to be indoors in these humidity and temperature controlled troughs, or they may be spread out over bamboo. I'm going to talk about some of the specific differences between these teas as I drink them, but basically withering and drying. So there is going to be some oxidation, because this could take, many hours, this withering and drying process. And so there's some oxidation. So white tea is more oxidized than green tea. A common misconception is that white tea is unoxidized tea. So it does go through some oxidation, and you'll see those color changes. And from there, the tea is finished. It may go through some sorting, but essentially it's ready for market. Some teas will go through some charcoal baking as well. Those are very, very traditional teas. We've got our heirloom silver needle if you want to taste a charcoal baked silver needle. Okay, elevation on these, from my recollection, 950 and 650 meters. So very, very similar scope, right? But it's all about the details, and especially with white tea, because the process is so simple, those small details really change things. So let's take a look at these leaves. Right off the bat, I hope that you can see that the Zhenghe tea has got a more green tone to it than the Fuding tea. So Fuding, a little bit more subdued in terms of colors. The Zhenghe is definitely more green, and that's a theme that is pretty much universal. Zhenghe prefers to produce white teas that are more verdant, that are more green. We're going to go through the tasting, but I guess the key takeaway point that I would like to make in this video is that a lot of people may taste a Zhenghe white peony, and because they have an association with white tea with Fuding, because Fuding is more famous, and we'll talk about that in a bit, there is this misconception that the tea is somehow a little bit too raw or unfinished. This is the style of Zhenghe white tea. So you can see the color difference there. Right. Let's talk about why Fuding is more famous than Zhenghe. And I'm sure there are plenty of reasons. Diantou is in Fuding, so the very original village that first created the technique supposedly for white tea is in Fuding area. As I said, the two areas are very close together. But I think, from my understanding, the main reason is that it's more of a branding exercise. Fuding was managed to somehow be selected as the area that was going to be promoted the most for white tea. Local governments, possibly even bigger organizations or the Chinese government invested in promoting Fuding white tea, and so it's benefited from lots and lots of investment, and therefore Fuding is worldwide known. But as I said, Zhenghe is just as historic as Fuding, and I feel like Zhenghe needs to have its moment in the sun a little bit, which is why I've purchased this year a Fuding and a Zhenghe, so you can do this taste test yourself. You can do this back to back and see how you feel about the differences. But please don't overlook Zhenghe and the joys of Zhenghe tea. Okay, let's start with the more familiar, with the Fuding. Extremely nutty, extremely fruity. Apricot jam, hazelnuts, nougat, and hay, dried grass. So it's got a meadowy quality in this dried hay. Apricot jam, hazelnut, nougat. Okay, now let's smell the much greener Zhenghe. So it is still warm, despite the color. It still has nougat, less hazelnuts, more almond, a little bit more raw almond nougat, and a peach. It reminds me of peach nectar, peach juice. So the fruits are less jammy. This is more apricot jam, hazelnut nougat, and more warm, slightly toasted nougat, toasted hazelnuts. This is lighter, but still, like, yeah, almond, raw almonds, nougat, and some peach nectar. And it is true that I love Fuding white tea because it tends to have this real nutty warmth to it. But I do feel that the market needs to understand the difference between Zhenghe and white tea, Zhenghe and Fuding, so that they can, make some, it is a different area and a different style of white tea. And as I said, a lot of people are under the misconception that it's sort of an unfinished or a somehow inferior cousin to Fuding. That's a lot to do with the marketing. All right, let's have a sniff of the wet leaves. Much fresher, as you can imagine. I'm getting some sorrel. I'm getting some blueberry yogurt. I'm getting the warmth of a blueberry muffin sponge cake, but certainly a lot brighter and bringing a little bit of a medicinal note to it as well. And now that bracing medicinal is like it's like the herbs that I associate with medicinal. I'm talking about rosemary or sorrel. That's come through. I'm getting blackcurrant jam. So the fruits are more piercing, more bright. The bright, awakening herbal note of the Fuding, with those, as I said, sorrel or rosemary, is more to the surface here. There is a little bit of that sponginess, but it really is, imagine a warm blueberry cake and then imagine like a blackcurrant sponge, but lighter and more on the blackcurrant. So definitely brighter, but equally fruity, equally complex, equally interesting, but just generally more piercing and brighter. And I think that's going to be the theme that we will see continue as we go through this tasting. All right, so I'm brewing with practically boiling water, I believe. Let me just double check the temperature here. Yep. Oh no, I was wrong. It was 90. But anyway, we're going to bump up the temperature for the next infusion. Bring those over here. So we'll brew this for a little bit longer. I like to brew it really hot just to really get the key differences out, because I'm not going to drink too many infusions with you. Okay, so let's see the difference here. Fuding. And Zhenghe. We'll look at the color difference. Let's get these little cups in here with a white interior, so you should be able to see the difference. So again, greener and lighter, but given the color difference of the leaves, it's not an extreme difference. All right, cheers everybody. Let's start with Fuding. Very soft, very syrupy coating. Okay, so some flowers, little white perfumed flowers. I think I wrote in my notes freesia before. So freesia, cherry, sponge cake, marzipan, flowery, nutty, sweet, and then that the green starts to come out. We'll stick with sorrel. All right, and now the Zhenghe. Again, brighter, more, again, medicinal, but I don't want that to put people off. Think how Manuka honey has a medicinal quality to it. And in fact, there's a bit of that Manuka honey quality here. It's creamy and it's warm, but it has this, and it's sweet, but it has this Manuka honey and a little bit of camphor, a little bit of green acorn in there. So it's definitely got more green. It's definitely got more of the, verdant notes about it. Texturally thicker, softer, sweeter, more marzipan, and is sort of held aloft as the palette for what white tea, the epitome of great white tea, should be by a lot of people, including myself. I always talk about how I love that nutty, warm, sweet, fruity note of a white tea. But I do think that we're missing a trick with Zhenghe, because that straight up your nose, you're getting all of these incredible herbals that are coming through. That is not just about cut grass or green. It's really like developed herbal quality to it. And you're still getting the honeys, the sweetness, and the cream. Let's brew them up again. But yeah, I think that I am as guilty as the next person at really just pushing the Fuding style, and I feel like it's time to repent and give love to Zhenghe. So how does Zhenghe make their tea more green? Well, clearly what's happening here is that long wither phase for the white teas, where it's withering from basically fresh all the way to dry, is shorter with Zhenghe generally. And there are going to be other factors here. So let me just state that from the outset. There's going to be so many other factors. There's going to be the weather differences between Fuding and Zhenghe. There's going to be differences in the picking, difference in the cultivar, differences in lots of different things. But the general rule of thumb, and what I've seen when I visited Zhenghe and Fuding, is that Zhenghe has a slightly shorter period of this withering to drying. They tend actually to be very traditional in Zhenghe, even more than in Fuding. One of the problems when you have a big marketing campaign around an area is it becomes so famous and so in demand that you have to increase yields. And every time there's a pressure on producers to increase yields, there are shortcuts that can be made. And oftentimes, in fact, a lot of the places that I visited in Fuding, they were not sun withering their tea. Whereas in Zhenghe, every place I went to was sun withering their tea. So I think actually, it's one of those things, isn't it? Like the more an area is promoted, there are hindrances that can develop in over promoting an area. And actually, if you want to taste a more traditional processing style, then Zhenghe might be a better way to go, because they definitely do a lot more sun withering. But the overall time is shorter. The other thing that they do is from what I've seen, they tend to pile the leaves during that wither phase much thinner, sometimes even in a single layer. Whereas in Fuding, they tend to have quite thick layers. Thicker layers will obviously mean it takes longer for it to dry out, and there's more heat that's developing in the thicker pile, and that will obviously change the chemical processes, bring about more oxidation. And so the thinner spreading on bamboo in Zhenghe is going to contribute to a faster wither dry time and therefore a greener leaf. All right, and you can see here just how different they are. I'll quickly show this camera here, but you can see the differences quite clearly. All right, one more infusion of these two teas, and I would highly recommend that you do this taste test yourself. Get to know the difference between Zhenghe and Fuding. Color difference not extreme, right? Given the color difference of the leaves, you would expect the color difference in the liquor to be much more, but it's not. All right, here we go. I mean, it still does have those bright notes that you want with white peony. Again, I always pick white peonies that have the large leaves because I don't like it when it's imbalanced, when it's too bud heavy. And this has got a wonderful balance. More warmth, more honeyed sweetness coming through. Those nougats, marzipans, cherry jams, and this green note, like nettle potentially, and that just provides a beautiful fresh counterbalance to all those warm sweet flavors. Cherry's still there. This one tastes more like it tastes more, I'm stopping myself because I don't want to say the word medicine too much because I think it will put people off, but it tastes more active. It tastes more like, whoa, this is going to have a particular physical effect on me. It is not as thick. It is more bright, refreshing. But it comes with this searing, herbal, fruity quality. Blackcurrant, but also the blackcurrant stems and the blackcurrant leaf, fig leaves. It's got more of those sweet, interesting, leafy quality to it. Whereas this is more about the processing of that warmth and oxidation. And so I'm tasting more the essence of the leaf, and I'm tasting more the essence of the processing and oxidation phase. And that would be a way that I would try to define the difference. Obviously, they're all about the tea and the bush, and you know, this is from 50-year-old tea bushes. So, you know, all of those factors are in play, of course, as well. Warmer, nuttier, rounder, brighter, in a way fruitier, but those fruits have tang, have verve, have excitement in the mouth, and there's more physicality. Not really that astringent, but more physicality with the Zhenghe tea. The white tea is soft and syrupy. Quickly smell these empty Gongda bays. Actually very similar. Both sponge cakey. Just like slightly different fruits. This one more like raisin sponge cake. This one maybe cherry, and the sponge cake is a bit lighter. Bit of port, but more similar, warm, fruity, slightly alcoholic on the nose. So there you go, Zhenghe versus Fuding. It shouldn't be a versus, it should be that both of these historic white tea processing and growing areas are celebrated. And I hope that this video does its little part to try to showcase the joys of Zhenghe white tea. Please don't think of Zhenghe tea as an inferior cousin to Fuding. And when you taste it, try to remember that this brighter, more verdant, more fresh, searing fruitiness and herbal quality is the style of Zhenghe, and is not just a sort of more raw, unfinished Fuding, which I think a lot of people may think when they first taste this tea. I hope that you enjoy both teas. Find out your favorites, find out which one you would feel like at any particular time of day. They are both stellar teas to have in your cupboard. That's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you're in the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags, keep drinking the good stuff, and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.